Hi, my name is Nick Schillace. I wanted to put together a series of videos to go over some of the ideas in my solo guitar primer that was published by Detroit Folk Workshop. Some people have been asking me to, get recordings together and that sort of thing, and just to illustrate some of the tunes. And I just thought maybe I would also do a little video just to talk about the book in general. It's divided into three parts, and the first part is just arpeggio-based solo guitar, where you're just doing like a pattern in your right hand and working through shapes or chords, and just really starting to develop that right hand control and general technique. The second section deals with monotonic bass playing, which will lead us into the more alternating bass style of fingerpicking that will be the focus going forward after this book. But then the third part, we take that monotonic style and just kind of improvise a little bit, talk about improvising, how to use your thumb with different things on the neck to just kind of do your own thing. It's important for me, to get my students to understand that getting stuck in an arrangement or an arrangement mentality, the tyranny of the arrangement is what I like to call it, is kind of like dangerous, because it can be difficult to feel like you're successful. And even though it's important to go through different arrangements to try to grow your playing and technique and vocabulary, it's really not the be all end all, to me at least, for playing music and also playing solo guitar, because it's just really about managing melody and harmony and understanding how those two parts work. There's a lot of different ways to play solo guitar, and finger style, finger picking, classical, chord melody, all these different terms are thrown around, and fundamentally they're the same. Not exactly the same, but similar, and it really still comes down to playing two or more parts on the instrument. And so we're going to deal with a very specific technique, starting with just essentially a finger assignment or position assignment. And I used to not do that with my students, but I found that it's better to just do that and use that as a foundation to sort of like base decisions on, just the same way you would with your left hand in positions. So if you're hopefully familiar with the positioning in the left hand, third position, fifth position, and so on. If you're in third position, you don't necessarily stay there. You might shift out of position, you might reach for a note or two outside of position, but generally you're there, and that would give you sort of like a reference point for your left hand. So your left hand should sort of know where it is in relationship to the neck and the notes and the frets and everything else. Well, same thing goes for the right hand. What we're going to do is we're going to play with like a thumb and three finger style, and students should be familiar with the way that most method books for solo guitar reference the fingers. So the thumb is usually referenced as P, and then the index I, the middle M, and the ring finger A. And that just comes from European nomenclature from when the guitar was developed in this style, and it sticks. You might find in other books it's referenced differently, but that's a really good thing to know, and that's how we'll talk about it. So in this style, and in part one of the primer book, and part two actually, but especially in part one, the thumb is going to be assigned to the low bass strings, so 6, 5, and 4. And then the index finger is going to be assigned to the third string, the middle finger is assigned to the second string, and the ring finger or the A finger is assigned to the first string. So on page 3 in the solo primer book, it just goes over some ways of just playing those strings open with the individual thumb and fingers, and just in a couple of different combinations. So it starts out with just the bass or just the thumb. So it would something like this. Moving on to the fingers, third finger, or third string, for index finger, second string, middle finger, and then first string, A finger. And then there's different combinations of the thumb, index, thumb, middle, and so on. So see that in the book, and you go through that, and it'll help you to just really balance your hand out. And I tell people that, you know, a lot of times people are in a hurry, especially when they're learning new techniques to go forward. But you really have to get control over your right hand in order to understand the future techniques that you're going to have to deal with. So don't be in a hurry. Make sure that you're using a metronome, and make sure that you're making contact, strong contact, and you really know where your right hand is, and the hand can kind of see the strings, like to say, in the positions without you always having to eyeball it. Now, the thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is understanding the process of learning as you go forward. And that's part of it. Like, if you don't have complete control, if there's any sort of hesitation, then you're not really doing it the way you need to be able to do it to succeed. So you can go, you know, in phases with this. It's, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but you really want to spend the time in the beginning to get it down. Now, as the beginning of the primer, part 1 goes forward, we start talking about arpeggios. And one thing that you might want to do is to look up the Giuliani 120 right hand patterns, or whatever they're called, on the internet. I think they're public domain. They're all over the place. They come in tab, they come in notation. It doesn't really matter. What you're trying to do is to just get your right hand to do different combination of patterns. And so I just give you a few in the primer just so you understand how this works. And the way you can keep track of it, because the way I do the arpeggios are the same as the Giuliani, where you go 6th string, 5th string, 4th string, and then back to the 5th string, and then you just keep repeating that with, you know, finger pattern along with those bass notes. You really don't need to even look at the notation, which I don't put tab in the beginning, because I want you guys to at least start thinking about notes, and then how the right hand relates to the notes as strings, not just as notes. If you just look at the way that I've written the pattern, so for instance, the first pattern is P-I-M-I, so that would be thumb, index, middle, index, and then you're going to go through the sequence of the basses. Then you really don't even have to like look at the page. So you put on a metronome, you think of the pattern, and this is what the first pattern would sound like. So on and so on. When I was in, you know, studying classical guitar when I was in college for a brief couple of years, I guess, I was always trying to like get the most out of my limited practice time. And so I did take those Giuliani exercises that were included in a really excellent book by Mark Tennant called Pumping Nylon. And or Scott Tennant, Pumping Nylon, and that has a lot of great technical information for both your left and your right hand. And I would just take these patterns without the left hand, just using the right hand, set my metronome, and then set a timer for 5 minutes, and I just would go and play that until I really got it into my hand. Doesn't have to be fast, just to sort of get control. So there's just a handful in my book, but seek out other arpeggios and you should be fine. Now, part 1 in my primer is just going to, like I said, take a pattern, and then take the pattern and just put it into like some kind of, basically like an etude. The tunes themselves aren't that involved, but at least it gives you some music, and it gives you some left hand action in order to just sort of get this style together. And in the book, I'm a strong proponent of knowing how to read notation. The way that I go forward with this style isn't as comprehensive as, say, classical reading in notation. It's more about understanding a bass melody, and then just like chord positions and how you fit the two together. We don't have to worry about that now. I've included tab because I don't really want you to focus too much on anything but your right hand in this primer. Both notation tab are included, but if you're even somebody that can read well in the first position, you're not necessarily going to be able to figure out all the different things you need to do in the left hand as we move up the neck and stuff. You might not know where those notes are, I guess. So memorize the pattern, and then take the pattern and put it with the chords or the positions or fingerings or whatever for each individual song. So that's what we're going to do. Is like the next videos are going to just have each song illustrated by the arpeggio, then I'll play the tune, and then that'll be that. You can find me online. Obviously, if you're here on YouTube, you can try to get me here, or my website is nickschillace.com. And you can also get the books there, and I'm available for Skype lessons, and if you're in the Detroit area, you can find me in a couple of different places, my house or my studio. So I hope you enjoy this. If you have any questions, definitely reach out, and I'll see what I can do to help you out. Thanks.